Hey, thank you for joining Not Enough Time. I'm featuring watches that I own and love, why I chose them, what other options I considered, and what else do I like from the brand. Today I'm featuring two watches that I own from GrandSeiko, and I'm also going to talk through other options which I've got my eye on and will probably be buying in the near future. I'm a fan of GrandSeiko. I love the sources they use for the inspiration that they bring to their dials, often from nature, and I love their finishing quality, which I think is great at the price. The two watches I own from GrandSeiko I think are really interesting choices, but they're not perfect watches, but they're great within a wider collection. The third watch I'm going to go into though, which I've got my eye on, I think may be the perfect GrandSeiko. To start with, here is the GrandSeiko SBGK005 from their sports collection. It's a limited edition of only 650 pieces, often called the Godzilla watch. It was made to celebrate the 65th anniversary of GrandSeiko and the 20th anniversary since the spring drive movement was introduced. It is a beast of a watch in terms of measurements, technical specifications and material. The diameter of the watch is 44.5 millimeters, but it wears 50 millimeters lug to lug. So it is wearable, but it is large. Thickness at 14.3 millimeters. It ain't thin. Technical specs. It uses the NR15 spring drive movement with a generous 72 hours 3-day power reserve and an accuracy of only 0.5 seconds per day. That's at the highest end of GrandSeiko's accuracy. That's a level of precision somewhere between 2 and 6 times superior than almost any other watch, including from Omega, including from Rolex and other brands. It's a stainless steel case, but interestingly the strap is made from shark leather, not alligator leather, making it very, very distinctive. This is the second GrandSeiko that I bought, and one of the things that drew me to this is that beautiful deep red dial. I was looking for a watch and across many different brands, including Omega, including obviously GrandSeiko. I looked at Audemars Piguet, looked at Rolex, many watch brands. I was looking to see, which were the watch brands that offered the red dial that I resonated with the most. And the deep color of red within this dial and the textures that you'll see really stood out for me, and it's beautiful under the light. Now it's a bold colored watch. It has presence on the wrist, but it isn't glitzy, it isn't gaudy. You can wear it as a day-to-day watch, and it is something that's very distinct, very different, very unique. But to be honest, it's not a watch that you're going to want to wear every single day, I don't think. But if you're interested in a collection where you have several watches, it's certainly one that I keep coming back to, and I'll wear often for days at a time. When I'm drawn back to this dial, this style of watch. Again, while I respect that this isn't for everyone has slightly different taste. I personally, I like to not just have very kind of conservative, bland watches, with kind of very monochrome dials. I'll feel like different colors, different styles of dials at different times, different styles of watches at different times, but I want something that's a bit interesting, that's a bit striking. But again, I don't want something that's gaudy. I'm not looking to wear a solid bracelet in gold with a gold case and diamonds around it, but I do like something that's well designed. It has beautiful texture, beautiful color that is just striking and brings interest when you're looking at. And they say this kind of deeper shade of red actually sort of brings you energy. And I feel that when I've been drawn to this watch has often been at very, at times where maybe it's been a very tiring, a very busy week, whether it be through work or outside. And it feels like a sort of energetic watch to kind of bring you back that energy, and certainly something I've appreciated at those times in particular. I love Japanese culture. I've visited Japan many times, both on holiday and with work. And as many of you know, Godzilla has been a kind of iconic figure since the comic was first introduced in 1954. And therefore I kind of like the tie-in with some of these cultural icons within Japanese culture. And the way this is done, I feel, is it's used it as a source of inspiration. GrandSeiko often use nature as a source of inspiration. They look to other sources here with Godzilla, but they've done it in a way that is not corny, not too cheesy, not too obvious. It doesn't have Godzilla emblazoned across the dial, but what they have done, when you look at the dial and the texture on the dial, it's sort of resembling the red rays that come from Godzilla's mouth. You look at the kind of fierce structure of the case with that beautiful shiratsu polishing, but then across the shark leather strap, they've used the texture and color which kind of is meant to resemble the skin of Godzilla, and then on the back, which is kind of fun, on the underside where you see the movement, they've also got the logo, you'll see kind of sketched on, of Godzilla. So it's subtle influences which are kind of fun to enjoy without it being overbearing or overshadowing the watch of its own merits. And lastly, what I found when I've worn this is it really comes into its own when you wear it outside, and particularly under sunlight. That's when the dial really comes into its element, with the sun glowing on it, and the red and the shades and the hues of that sort of sunburst red with the texture across it really stand out, really pop out. And when I compared this to other, and there are a number manufacturers who do very interesting dials in this kind of deep shade of red, but this to me ultimately was my preference. And I looked and I compared it both to other models from GrandSeiko that you'll see here. The one with the gold case in particular I think is beautiful, but that watch at 28,000 is several times the price of this one. And then if you look across, for example, to Omega's range, and they've got the lovely terracotta shade Aquaterra, these were all other watches that I was considering, but I did kind of keep coming back to this one, mainly just because it is so different, it is unique, only 650 pieces, and and it's been a theme through many, but not all of my collection, just having products and watches I can enjoy that I also know are not mass market. You're not likely to come across that many other people that are wearing them. They're interesting, they're different, they're unique, but they're beautifully well made. And if you come back to the ethos of GrandSeiko, since they were first introduced in 1960, the idea was to build a watch that would be as precise, durable, easy to wear, but also beautiful as humanly possible. GrandSeiko really set out on a mission to try and create the ideal watch. And what I find is, I wouldn't say this is the ideal standalone watch, but as part of a collection, it certainly represents an ideal option to wear at certain times. And as I look across their collection, I don't feel the sports collection, which this one interestingly is a part of, is necessarily their standout collection. The other watch which I'll feature here comes from their heritage collection, and I think it's heritage and elegance for me which is GrandSeiko's strongest suits. And I like, in particular, the more I've thought about this, their focus on smaller limited edition runs. So they have a few very well known editions like the Snowflake, the White Birch, which are lovely watches, but I feel I'm kind of most drawn to these limited edition inspirations from various sources, watches that they're only making a few hundred of at a time, and I think that's their strong suit. And I feel GrandSeiko are only getting better, and over the years we'll look back and people will start to really cherish and value these limited edition runs that were so unique and rare, yet beautiful and also different. And the other GrandSeiko I own is this one, which I actually bought first. It's the SBGK005 Shunbun, which is inspired by Japanese cherry blossom. And my wife and I, a number of years back, around 2014, had a lovely 2.5 week holiday around Japan. We were there end of March, early April, and really enjoyed Japan's cherry blossom season in its full bloom. And it's incredible to see, and we spent some time around Tokyo and the lovely gardens, and they really come alive with cherry blossom. There's so many families out there enjoying time in the park, taking photos of the beautiful cherry blossom trees. While we were there on holiday, my wife and I enjoyed cherry blossom sake, really got into the spirit of it. We have souvenirs we took back from Japan, which we certainly cherish. And when I saw this watch and when it first came out, it definitely resonated with me from that connection, and I feel it bottles up another side and spirit of beauty and culture within Japan, which only really GrandSeiko are in a place to bring and deliver for us, and just provide that different offering than we're seeing, let's say, from other brands. So that definitely drew me to this watch. There's a lot of speculation. It's a pink watch. Is that for me? I would say what's interesting with this watch is its shade seems to morph and change so much depending on the light. It's a very subtle shade of pink that majority of the time actually is very silvery in its tone, depending whether the light is directly on it or in the evening when it's a more subdued light. The saturation of that color very much fluctuates. But as a watch, yes, it is beautifully finished. It's interesting with its titanium bracelet. Some people feel, I'm a stickler for having a stainless steel bracelet. I like to feel the heft and weight of the watch. And I get that perspective. But again, when this is, let's say, a watch within a collection, I kind of like this as it's so light and easy to put on the wrist. It almost feels like a second skin. And I've certainly found as well that titanium bracelet doesn't scratch as much as stainless steel. I'm not a fan of many watch bracelets outside of Rolex. I do feel Rolex nail the bracelet, whether it be the Oyster bracelet or the Jubilee bracelet, or, almost no one does it better, with the exception of some of the Integrate bracelet watches, like the Royal Oak. But, so what I find is I'm often disappointed, whether it be, Omega or also GrandSeiko with their bracelets, and sometimes find, their watches are better with leather straps. My feeling for this particular watch, it's fluctuated over time. I feel that I've grown to appreciate the bracelet more, and it's certainly one of the better bracelets that I've seen. I have tried this watch as well with a leather strap, and I do enjoy that too. I've tended to come back to the titanium just because it's my only titanium watch. So overall, it's a watch I like, I enjoy. It's one where when I put it on my wrist, I can wear it for days on end, and I don't really want to take it off. But then there are other times where I'm wearing another watch. It's not always the one that I think of that I'm drawn to, and that's where, to give a balanced perspective on this, it's where I think GrandSeiko haven't quite nailed it. I appreciate the beauty of this watch. I like it very much. I don't know if I absolutely love it. It's nice on the wrist, but it doesn't have standout presence. It is quite subtle. If I compare this to wearing, for example, a steel bracelet Rolex, I look at that and I really feel it on my wrist. I feel it has a lot more presence. I get more of a sense from that, I feel, than I do from this GrandSeiko, if I'm honest. But that's nothing to diminish the brand and my appreciation of what they do. I also think, perhaps controversially, that I almost wish they went a little further with the watch in terms of that color. It's like, if it's going to be cherry blossom, then let's just get a slightly deeper level of saturation, because what I find is it tends to most of the time just look like a very silvery dial. And I was considering the white birch, I was considering the snowflake, and I love when you look at the snowflake, the sense of, you can almost see the sort of smudge of the logo on the snow. It's a lovely detail, but I didn't go for that because I felt it's too subtle. From a distance it just looks like a plain, white dial, and I went for this because I felt the texture and detail in the dial in a slightly different shade is what is most interesting and set this apart, as well as that connection to Japan sort of culture, beauty and nature with the cherry blossom. But I just feel they should have gone a little bit bolder, a little bit further still, for this really to have been a watch that stood out and popped out. And when I was making the decision about this, I was so close to also considering that deep red offering that they have here, you'll see, but didn't opt for that in the end because the Godzilla watch for me was the nicer red watch. So across the two, they both offer different things. I enjoy them, I wear them, I like them very much, but if I'm honest, I don't truly love them. This watch also has the spring drive movement. It also has a generous 72-hour power reserve. Its precision is plus or minus 1 second a day. Still fantastic compared to almost any other watch in the market. Not quite at the top end of the specs of the Godzilla. But the last thing I'll just say is that movement on both these watches, that spring drive movement, if you haven't seen it before, is beautiful. Of across any watches I own, across or any of the brands, it certainly is something to behold. The nature of that sweeping second hand. And lastly, to end on, my wish list GrandSeiko, which I'm very close to purchasing, is this one, the SBGK005. And when I take what I love about GrandSeiko, my slight concerns and reservations in the two that I've picked from them so far, and I look at this watch, I at times kick myself and think, maybe I should have got this one first. For me, this is the perfect GrandSeiko, and I feel it's the space that they play in best. Actually, elegant day to dress watch, in that sort of that is their forte. Bringing also again these beautiful dials, so you compare them to the competition. That's where they're offering something so distinct and unique, and particularly at this price point. They're often compared GrandSeiko to Rolex, and I love Rolex. I think it's the wrong comparison. I think actually in some ways it's doing GrandSeiko a disservice when you think of the quality of their finishing. I actually would compare at times GrandSeiko to Patek Philippe, but at a fraction of the price. So I've considered, for example, the Patek Philippe Calatrava. I'm on a wait list. Good luck with that. And I do love the watch, and I do love its elegance. I did want to add a slightly more formal, dressy style watch within my collection. But I look at this, which is literally almost a quarter of the price. You look at the level of high polish, the finishing. You look at the beauty and interest within that dial, and I think, which of these two watches will I actually enjoy the most? And how much, if I'm being brutally honest with myself, am I intrigued by the Patek Philippe because it is a Patek Philippe, and there is a certain allure to that from brand perception and marketing, and their whole philosophy of owning it across multiple generations. But if I try and just take a step back and not get too sucked into that, and think again of the quality of both the movement, the finishing, but actually the superior dial of the GrandSeiko, I really have to stop and think, if I had this, why on earth would I even consider spending 4 times the money that I can't really afford on the Patek Philippe? And so I feel for me this is perhaps the most interesting, beautiful watch all up that GrandSeiko have made. I love the leather strap in that dark blue alligator skin. GrandSeiko make beautiful quality, soft leather, supple straps. The dial, I think, here is phenomenal, and the layout of the dial is very interesting with the secondhand, but also how they've put on the power reserve onto the dial in this watch in a much more elegant way than they did there in my previous watch with the Shunbun. So interested to see this in person. If I'm honest, I haven't yet, but I have seen one for sale that I'm about to purchase. I'll feature this in the future. But just to end on, I do love GrandSeiko. I think they're bringing such interesting and wonderful watches, to us, which we can cherish and enjoy. I do think their philosophy of these short run limited editions that give you the opportunity to own watches that were never made for mass market and are so different and with such different sources of inspiration. And I particularly feel that their forte and superpower is working within this slightly more, dressy space, where no one, I feel, is doing it better at this price point. If you like this video, please do hit like. Please do subscribe to the channel. I would really appreciate it. Add comments. I'm interested to hear your opinions. If you agree which of these watches you like the most, or alternatively, are there other watches from GrandSeiko which you prefer? There are many which I haven't featured here today. The Whirlpool dial is another favorite that I've seen, but I tried to shortlist to the ones that stood out for me the most. Thank you for your time, and I hope you enjoy Not Enough Time.